Welcome back everyone. We're going to cover burden stitch today, and that's a stitch that was used extensively in Jacobean crewel work. It's this one here, often used in areas of greenery, so little hillocks or shrub areas. It's a very dense stitch, so it's packed quite tightly, and you might find that it'll take a little bit of practice. So I'm going to show you first on the hoop, and I'm going to demonstrate this in different colours so that you can see how the stitch is made up. And then on the wheel I'm going to do it in one colour only. So first of all, what you do is lay threads horizontally across the shape that you're going to cover. We're just going to do a rectangular shape because that's easier to start with. Bring your thread up just below one of the laid threads in the centre of your work, and then take your needle down over the next laid thread but above the one after. So you're looking now for a vertical stitch, and then we're going to do another one not quite next to, leaving a thread's width between the stitches. This won't be as far as you think you need to go, so just leave a thread's width. Now this is one way to do this stitch. I'm going to show you another way afterwards so that you can see what is best for you. But if you haven't done the stitch before, this is a good way to just try it out. So we're going to go all the way along the line. The difficulty is getting the stitches vertical but also leaving the same amount of gap. So I'll do one more. There we go. Now I'm going to put my second colour in, and that's going to be in red. So with the second row, you'll come up just above the next laid thread down, and then take your thread over the next one but under this one here and into the gap, and then again. So bear in mind here you need to leave a little gap underneath as well. And take it to there. And the next one. Will go to there. So you only ever cross one thread. You're going under all the others. So you can see it has this interlocking effect. So I would go one way and then the other. Obviously you'd do the whole thing. So you can see on this next stitch I'm going just under that line there. And when you come to do the top line, you would go above that one, and then linking in the gap that you made earlier. Oops. So there are still gaps between these stitches here. Let me just go back to the first colour. So that would go on the line there, over that thread and into the gap that you made below. So on the line, into the gap, and so on. So you can see how the stitch is made up. You've still got gaps here which would need to be filled with the other colour. Now, once you've got to grips with how the stitch works, you can do it a different way. So you can just start somewhere and take the stitch as you did originally, and then immediately go next to it and down. So let's go this way. So you're going next to that one that you just did, but there is a gap below. So you're always going next to that one at first, and then you're not going next to that bit because you've got to leave a gap. So if you prefer to do the stitch like this, you can do, and that's what you'll see in a lot of books, but you can lose track quite easily. I've drawn a blue line here inside the split back stitch outline, and I've laid 6 threads across the shape. You don't want too many or you'll find it really difficult, and equally you don't want too few. So if you keep to 6, if you've got this size of wheel, that will do you very well. Come up just above the second one, not piercing the thread here. Take it across the next one and then vertically just under this one here. So you're coming up bang in the middle of the shape. And then take another one, but leave a gap. So we'll do it this first way first so that you can see how the stitch is made up. It doesn't matter, by the way, for this first stitch whether you go that way to that, from that way to the bottom or from the bottom to the top. The difficulty is leaving the right amount of gap and getting your stitch vertical. As I said, I would practice this stitch on a separate hoop before you do it on the wheel, because it is one of the more difficult stitches to get right, and also to get your head round. Once you start, this first row is easy to see, but it's important to get it right because the distance between the stitches determines the distance in future rows. Okay, so take your thread across the back and then come back the other way. So go down as far as you can towards these laid threads here without piercing them. We start in the centre of the shape because it's easier to get the lines vertical. I think that one was slightly off, but I'm going to leave it for now. And then one more. This isn't quite a rectangle, so you might have some little bits to fill in later, but we'll do that later. And then come back to the centre of the shape on top of that first laid stitch and take your thread to just underneath where the third laid thread is. It's hard to see it now because you've covered it up, but what you want to do is to go in between the gap just under that laid thread. So in between the gap. And again, you're trying to get these stitches vertical. You only ever cross one thread. Now I'm going to put another one in the end here. And then go back to this side. Now I'm going to go to the line again in the middle, take it over that last line and do the same thing. So and on these second and subsequent rows it is easier to come up and then go down into the gap rather than the other way around. This is working quite nicely in a variegated thread, so you can do that. Put one just on the outside there. And now I'm going to go back the other way. Okay, so that might look finished, but it isn't quite, because you have these little gaps that you've left on this final stitch, so you need to just take some smaller stitches to fill those. And they're just half stitches, and they go to below the first line that you laid. I'm running out of thread, but continue just like that all the way along. And in this case, I'm just starting from the end and going up. That's fine. So I'm going to continue with this, and then what you do is come back on this row and go back into here. I'll finish this and come back and show you. So to finish the burden stitch, you come up below. So to finish the burden stitch, you come up just next to that line, that laid line, and then take your thread below, over the next one and below that one. That's not very good, is it? So to finish the burden stitch, come up next to this line here, take it over this one and go below the next one, which obviously you can't see, and then carry on like that. Now the second way I showed you to do this stitch, you can do if you wish. So if you wanted to do that, you would need to go take a stitch and then come up next to and go back down to the line. So you're going next to your thread by the line here and into the gap. So next to your thread, next to your thread here, and into the gap, right next to your thread, and that stitch makes a gap at the end there, and then next two, and into the gap. So you may wish to do it like that. Some people find that easier. You don't have to think about what gap to leave. So I've got these little bits to fill here. And I've still got these bits to fill here. I'd forgotten about those. I must remember to go back and do that in a minute. So I'm now going back to this method. I will finish this now and come back and show you. This is my finished burden stitch, and you'll be very pleased to hear that I'm not going to outline it in split back stitch this time. So do join me for the next stitch, which is going to be some more weaving, and we're going to do some woven picots.